Okay. Okay, so I'll leave that with you. So we can continue now.
Okay, next slide, please. So for strategy, we have 6 activities. The first of them is redefining the identity of technology. Here we look at an appropriate technology approach, and this is covered by 2 other aspects, which are appropriate function and appropriate technical properties. Appropriate function will cover how technology will be used for the user's needs, and appropriate technical properties mean that the technology should have the characteristics and structure to perform function. So these 2 aspects will reflect appropriate technology. In the second activity is it's framing new functions, and it is important how a new product is designed.
Sorry, you see, when you're doing the strategic grid and you get everything on, that's fine. But when you're explaining, it's actually good to run through one. Do you have a diagram of the grid itself and one process running through on the grid?
Yeah, so that's...
So you're talking about the first one, redefining identity of technology. That's fine, but where would you put that on the grid?
We're gonna discuss the grid later, so on the strategic grid later in the presentation.
Okay, I'll give you a chance to explain it the way you want to then.
Okay. So in the second activity, it is important how a new product is designed to meet the needs of affordability and adaptability. And lastly, we have, sorry, I'm a bit lost here. Oh, okay. So the next one is the radical redesign of technical structure. So here, solar companies will redesign the product through innovation in architecture and components, and it also involves the substitution of materials. Okay, next slide, please. So here we have building a local. So we asked what kind of production technique is efficient in providing appropriate technology, and how do companies make it happen? So appropriate technology needs a fit between production techniques and technical structure, as well as between production techniques and the characteristics of local resources. And based on this, we can identify the next 2 activities. So in reframing production capacity, companies will aim to simplify the production process, and they also aim to make manufacturing as simple as possible. And lastly, we have empowering local entrepreneurs for inclusive participation. And this needs to be done because in an emerging economy with limited resources, the activities are hindered by shortages of entrepreneurship and resource constraints. Okay, next slide, please. So for capabilities, you can see that we are revisiting some of the same activities that were in strategy. But this time we will focus more on what needs to be done to execute the business strategy. So in framing new functions, it is important how a new product is designed for affordability and adaptability. They also need to meet the specific requirements of customers. So for example, solar thermal systems will provide an alternative to people in rural areas, so they don't have to rely on gas and electricity. Next, we have the redesign of architecture and components. So for example, a leading solar company, TH, redefined the architecture of solar thermal systems to make it simpler than the architecture in other countries. In reframing production capacity, solar companies will aim to simplify the production process by splitting the architecture of solar thermal systems into modules and reconfiguring the architecture. And lastly, solar companies will empower entrepreneurs for participation by initiating various activities, such as training. Next slide, please. So one of the values is the solar thermal system itself, and it incorporates simple to use features and does not require consumers to change their lifestyle. So this increases the attractiveness of the product, which allows it to be adopted by a large group of users. So next we have architecture and components. So the excellent re-engineering in architecture simplified the product, which provided the unique functions desired by emerging markets. So now the next one, by reconfiguring the architecture and using modular designs and alternative materials, the solar companies aim to make manufacturing as simple as possible and to also achieve low product prices. And lastly, we get to how the solar thermal industry grew in the beginning. So the leading solar companies initiated activities to promote knowledge of the product and manufacturing technology within the industry. These activities included technology transfer, training, and local development programs. And all these activities and knowledge sharing would ultimately set up the technology and knowledge function for the growth of the industry. So that's it for the business model. I'll now hand you over to Leshan and Nawaz to explain the alignment model.
Okay, I think before you go on, what you've done, okay, uh, it took me a little while to understand what you were doing in terms of linking it, okay? But what you've done is actually summarize from the case study in terms of strategy, capabilities, and value, right? So it's actually, if you look at the slide here, before we move on from the slide, uh, what I want you to do, and it's actually quite a good slide in terms of trying to work out the first value, the solar thermal system. What kind of value will that be? Will it be an economic value or whatever? Does everyone understand what I'm trying to get at? Okay, okay, I noticed that we've even got a few more participants. So at this stage, what I would like us to do is go to Moodle, and we'll actually have the slide. Go to Moodle, and I'd like you to actually put each of those values in a category. Okay, so I'll do the first one for you so that you have an understanding of what I'm talking about. So when you're looking at the solar thermal system, and notice the explanation for this from the group was simple to use features and many users. So this is basically a kind of social value that's coming across to it. So what this is actually doing is providing hot water to many people. So it's a social value itself. Okay. So what I'd like you to do now is the other three, the architecture and components, the reconfiguring architecture, and the growth of the industry, look and put them into a category. So we're going to do this as a discussion in Moodle. So if you can log on to Moodle, what we can do is, if you want the screen, you can leave the screen here on and go into Moodle. Or alternatively, if you find that you're going to flip from one screen to the other, then maybe just take a photograph of the screen, and then when you're in Moodle, you can actually refer to it. Okay.
Lisa, um, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, sorry. I did email you our slides just in case Lesson's data runs out.
I think uh, Lesson has got unlimited data. I've got unlimited data at home as well, so I've got no problem.
Yes, my data is fine.
Your data is fine. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, I muted everyone, so we didn't have feedback coming through. So who's continuing now? You need to unmute yourself and then continue, okay?
Hi, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. So, morning, everyone. So today, Nawaz, Mohammed, and I will be discussing the alignment model.
Remember, we can't see who you are, so you need to tell us who the I is as well.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, Leshan Ray is speaking. Yeah, so basically, so the alignment model for this case study on China's solar thermal industry starts off with redefining the identity of technology, which is the business strategy, as you can see. And this is one of the primary factors in enhancing appropriateness of technology. And in terms of its main factor, redefining identity of technology is broken up also into processes 2 and 3. So in terms of the identity of technology, the combination of it is the combination of its technical properties and its use of functions. The main idea behind the identity of technology in terms of the solar thermal industry is its appropriateness, which is defined by two parts, appropriate function and appropriate technical properties. Appropriate function means that the usage of technology should satisfy the specific characteristics and user requirements of emerging markets. And for those of you who do not know what emerging markets is, it's basically in terms of it is economics of it's when economics of the country is in the process of becoming a developed country, or typically a move in typically it is moving towards free markets. Like the free market is an economic system based on supply and demand with little or no government control. So this covers how technology will be or may be used for users' needs and markets. Appropriate technical properties refers to the built-in structure, technical performance, and the scientific properties that give the technology its shape. This means that the technology should have the physical structures, characteristics, and capabilities required to perform certain tasks concerned with solar thermal systems in this case. So this links up to the IT strategy which is 1.1, as you can see, meeting specific needs of affordability and adaptability. Now this IT strategy refers to how a new product is designed in terms of product functions, which are critical to its acceptance among the target users or customers. Based on research, the functions most valued by emerging markets are compatible with the context and the specific demand features of the user. From a product perspective, this translates to demand for new product functions, such as, in this case, affordability and adaptability under certain conditions in maximizing value for customers in rural areas. The solar companies focus their innovation efforts on meeting the specific requirements for every individual product. For example, development of China's solar thermal system industry began in the 1990s. And this solar thermal system basically only needs water and sunlight, which provides an alternative function such that it does not require any fuel, which reduces costs. Now we move on to 1.2, conforming to local values. Organizations such as local companies integrate local data and values into their product designs to create a tight blend of emotional and economic value for users. Aligning and conforming products with local values and traditions is appropriate from a local perspective, as it enables the users to integrate a new technology with their traditional values and methods. For example, again, the solar thermal system incorporates simple to use features, and it does not require consumers to change their lifestyle. Such initiatives enhance the attractiveness of the product. Thus, a new assignment of functions spreads by being adopted by large groups of users or businesses. In terms of 1.3, which is a synergic innovation in architecture and components. So basically, this means instead of making trivial adaptations to an existing product, solar companies redesign the product through innovation in both architecture and its components, including using new components and reconfiguring the architecture that integrates them. The adoption of the principles of a synergic innovation in both architecture and components provide a local low-cost option for offering the required functions with an innovative technical structure. And in terms of the technical structure, findings illustrate that the principle of a synergic innovation in architecture and components provide a logical low-cost option to create appropriate technology, redesigning core components with the use of abundant local material, which enables the use of local resources. And finally, we go on to 1.4, which is substitution of material. This is basically the simplification of the architecture and the substitution of materials, which lower the cost of manufacturing significantly, thus enabling a price dramatically lower than that of the comparable product. For an example, again, solar thermal systems, which is comprised of evacuated tubes made of glass, a locally available low-cost material. Therefore, the evacuated tube in terms of the solar thermal system is much cheaper than the flat plate, which was developed in the 1950s. So moving on to
just one moment there. Okay, what you've done is you've done quite a good explanation in terms of the IT strategy and business strategy. But the only issue I have is point 2 and point 3 actually fall into point 1. So maybe because of how broad point 1 is, you could have actually used point 2 and point 3. Okay?
Yes, yeah.
But, so instead of point 1. So, yeah. And I see you've done that for point 4 as well. In point 4, you've taken part of point 4 and you got it as point 5. So you need to actually separate them, because what happens now like this, it means your explanation for point 2 and point 3 is going to be repeated as point 1.
Yeah, so basically, like in the redefining of technology, which we identified, it just splits into these two business strategies here, which is the framing of new functions and the radical redesign, which also links up to these IT strategies. So I just thought maybe it could.
Okay, I think, yeah, so in other words, what you should have done then was instead of point 1, used point 2 and point 3.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Okay. So similarly for point 4, so you don't have to explain point 2 and 3 now because you've covered that in point 1.
Yeah. So yeah, back to the framing new functions. So in terms of this business strategy, framing new functions, basically, it is a set of activities which consists of framing and providing new product solar functions that match the specific characteristics of emerging markets and provide perceived value for such target users. For example, again, the solar thermal system incorporates simple to use features, and it does not require consumers to change their lifestyles. as the new functions required by emerging markets are radically different from those in developed markets, radical change in technical structure is needed. The analysis in terms of this research illustrates that exploring appropriate technology in emerging markets consists of knowing what kind of technical structure is needed and what functions it can perform, which links together the framing new functions of individual products. As you can see in the IT strategy, these two IT strategies are repeated under framing new functions. In terms of number 3 now, for radical redesign of technology structure, this is basically, as discussed in framing new functions, it is organizations radically redesign both the architecture and components of the product simultaneously at the same time, due to the unique content and characteristics, and requirements of emerging markets in terms of the solar thermal systems development. And again, point 3.1 and 3.2 is repeated in the in terms of the IT strategy. Sorry. Number 4 now, building local supply systems.
Okay, sorry, don't go into point 4. Let's look at the business capability and the IT capability for the first 3, because the first 3 is basically can be considered as 1 or 2 aspects, 1 or 2 processes, right? So let's look at the business capability and the IT capability.
I'll hand you over to Nawaz now.
Hi, everyone. I will be discussing the capabilities. So the first business capability is framing new functions, which consists of framing and providing new solar thermal functions to emerging markets, such as low-income markets in rural areas. The IT capability, meeting specific needs of affordability and adaptability, links to the business capability of framing new functions, which is point 1.1. In maximizing value for customers in rural areas, the solar companies focus their innovation efforts on meeting the requirements in rural areas. For example, due to the deficiency of gas and electricity, rural users in China cannot use hot water to bath. The solar system solves this problem as it only needs water and sunlight to function. The solar products imported from other countries are also too expensive and would not work well due to the unstable water pressure in many rural areas. In response to this, the solar thermal system replaces automated control with manual operation to enable it to work well in rural areas, therefore meeting the rural users' needs of affordability and adaptability. The next IT capability, which is 1.2, conforming to local values, also links to framing new functions. The solar companies conform to local values by integrating local norms into their product designs to create a blend of emotional and economic value for users. This is important as it enables the users to integrate new technology with their traditional values. For example, the solar thermal system incorporates simple-to-use features, and it does not require consumers to change their lifestyle, thereby increasing the attractiveness of using the system. The next business capability is the radical redesign of technology, which consists of redesigning both the architecture and the components of the system. The IT capabilities, synergic innovation in architecture, and the substitution of material both link to the radical redesign of technology. Adoption of these principles of innovation provides a logical low-cost option for offering the required functions with an innovative technical structure. The simplification of the architecture and the substitution of the materials lowered the cost of manufacturing, thus enabling a price much lower than competitors. An example of this is that system uses glass to produce the evacuated tube, which is the core component of the system, instead of the heavy metal used by other companies. This innovation lowered costs dramatically, therefore making their product cheaper than other competitors. Lishan can discuss the next three strategies.
Okay, before you continue, okay, the reason, look, 1 and 2 is actually, I think, 2 and 3 from the previous slides.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so just be careful of it coinciding. The issue that I have here is your IT capability. How is that an IT capability? For example, there's a substitution of material.
Mhm.
Do you understand what I'm asking?
I understand, sir. So the substitution of materials, the system uses a substitution of materials such as the evacuated tube instead of other materials. So this kind of innovation lowers costs, therefore making the product cheaper than other companies.
So where's the IT?
I think it's linked to the, I'm not sure about that, sir.
Okay. Thank you for being truthful.
Yeah.
The IT is basically used in terms of finding appropriate materials. Can you see? So you're not really using the IT for any measurements or something to that effect, but it's like doing a search to find, okay, you've got this material, what's an appropriate material under these climate conditions that they can use. Okay, so if you want to, so can you see, you have to actually link it to the IT to quite an extent. Okay, so let's
Yes,
go
sir.
back. Let's go back to the previous slide and go through number 3. But you guys need to watch your numbering. Your numbering is a problem because, to me, the business capability is to point 2. Point 1 is actually point 2. So you haven't done what is done here on the business strategy and the IT strategy. So you basically lost point 1 completely from here, which is absolutely fine because point 1 is repeated in point 2 and 3. Okay, but just watch the numbering.
Yes, thanks for that.
Continue.
Okay, so back to building local supply system. This is another critical factor in obtaining appropriateness of technology, which is further broken down again into processes 5 and 6. Sorry about that. So building local supply systems, this category is, this business strategy is concerned with the process of appropriateness of technology as well. The supply system includes managing the movement of raw materials in an organization, also concerned with certain aspects of the internal processing of materials into finished products, as well as the movement of finished products from the organization to the final consumer. Appropriate technology requires a fit between production techniques and technical structure, as well as between production techniques and local resource characteristics. Based on this logic, the analysis identifies these two activities, which, like I explained, is broken down into this number point 5 and 6. So building local system supply systems. Now this is linked to the IT strategy, as you can see, which goes into 4.1, modularizing the core technology. The solar companies incorporate modularity in the architecture in terms of a solar thermal system to simplify the production process. A leading solar company or different solar companies basically integrates the parts required for a solar thermal system into a set of basic modules and keeps the architecture, interfaces, and standards stable into their production of the product. Thus, the technology and knowledge of the key component, example, the evacuated tube, is embedded into their modular systems or blueprints, if you would like to call it that. The modularization of technology makes it possible to manufacture solar thermal systems locally and scale up quickly in a short time frame. Therefore, in places with local manufacturing capacities, innovations in the product architecture that enable the participation of the local manufacturing capacity can create a new production mode. This new mode not only creates a low cost and flexible technology supply system, but also enables the addition of local content to local solutions, thus contributing to affordability and other functionalities valued by customers in emerging markets. Now we move on to 4.2, designing for manufacturability and scale. The reframing of production techniques also involves the simultaneous consideration of cost, speed, and scale. By reconfiguring the architecture and using alternative materials and modular designs, the solar companies aim to make manufacturing as simple as possible and to achieve low product prices. Meanwhile, modularity allows leading companies to provide standard modules with common features, thereby enhancing the scale economy for their capital-intensive business. Thus, the leading solar companies integrate large-scale manufacturing and labor-intensive processes into their value chain to balance low cost, speed, and scale. Now we move on to enhancing local capacity and business mindsets. Firstly, enhancing the business mindset is related to the required knowledge about process of empowerment. Certain cognitive structures or blueprint structures often shape and articulate conceptions of value and constitute shared templates or blueprints that facilitate the adoption of similar patterns. Isolated from sources of knowledge from the outside world, people in an emerging economy often cannot perceive opportunities to develop their own business. In response, the leading solar companies start by providing training and demonstrating the economic potential of the solar thermal system in this case. They also urge potential entrepreneurs to think beyond existing patterns and possibilities to create value from existing productive opportunities or expand spaces for entrepreneurial opportunities in terms of the emerging market. Now we move on to 4.4, which is building bridging links. This refers to the peripheral ties or outer tie of materials that tend to be high in unique resources and low in closure. The solar companies set up working stations within rural areas to increase the structural diversity of local networks. These workstations act as ties that bridge the economy to both the solar companies and other resources needed to create local businesses. These links or such links help to connect entrepreneurs with fragmented local resources, thus changing the local entrepreneurs' cognition and attitudes to the entrepreneurial opportunities within the solar thermal industry. the bridging links enhance the flow of information and other resources. It increases the productive opportunity space and provide channels of access to business capabilities. For example, the leading solar companies initiate various bridging links with both local entrepreneurs and other partners and enhance knowledge sharing among the partners, thus connecting fragmented resources and entrepreneurs and enabling local entrepreneurs to build up small, medium enterprises to pursue low-cost innovations for local users in an emerging market. And 4.5 is enacting new industrial structures. This is where the empowerment activities of solar thermal companies enable a growing number of local entrepreneurs to set up small medium enterprises and integrate the existing manufacturing capacity into the solar thermal industrial chain. The leading solar companies enable new industrial structure. They provide a modularized component with capital-intensive manufacturing, whereas local small medium enterprises act as satellite units of the leading companies, assembling and distributing the final product to meet local needs in an emerging market. The industrial chain and the relationship among companies in the industry are envisioned by restoring constraints and resource for financing in a local context. The collaborative partnership between leading solar companies and local small medium enterprises creates locally sustainable innovation ecosystems, allowing for better solutions for different market categories. Now we move on to number 5, which is reframing production capability.
Okay, but that's the same now as that was incorporated in 4. Number 5 and 6 were incorporated in number 4.
Yeah, so.
Okay, so in actual fact, you could have lost point 1 and point 4. So your 4 processes would have been the remaining ones. But what was good is the way you explained them. But I think because different people have explained it, therefore the IT capability from the IT strategy is a little bit distant. So we need to actually tie that up.
Yes, yeah, we just thought of actually repeating the IT strategy because in terms of these, because we didn't actually want to leave them blank because it links up to the main critical factors like in number 1 and 4. So
okay.
Yeah. Okay, I'll just...
So I think what you need to know is I do look for those kind of things when I'm marking.
Yeah.
Right? So just be careful when you are submitting anything for assessment.
Yeah.
Okay, the one thing that we, okay, it was my fault as well, because we went through point 1 or point 2 and 3, and then also on terms of the business capability and the IT capability. But what we didn't do was link it to the value. So even, for example, now you've done 5 and 6, which your group member is going to continue with. So we need to link 5 and 6 to value. So what I'm saying is each process, once you've gone through the process throughout the alignment model, the last part should be the value that that process is bringing. Okay.
Okay.
So I should have mentioned it earlier, but I didn't. But I'm reminding you about it now. Okay, so if we can continue with the next part.
Okay, so moving on to number 5, reframing production capability. This basically means the activities that solar companies adopted to redefine the production technique that fits both the technical structure of their technology and a local resource characteristics. This construct basically splits into or links up into this IT strategy, modularizing the core technology, which is 5.1, and 5.2, designing for manufacturability and scale. Its strong manufacturing capacity enables China to make products with a high performance price ratio. And under the conditions of resource storage, the capability to leverage these alternative capacities and resource funding may become critically important for building appropriate production techniques when designing products such as the solar thermal systems or any solar energy renewable products. Finally, moving on to 6, which is empowering local entrepreneurs for inclusive participation. So the solar companies distribute various activities to empower local entrepreneurs to participate in the industrial chain. And for those of you who do not know, the industrial value chain, it basically involves examining the various stages of a product's production. So like in terms of the solar thermal system, there'll be steps involved into putting the pieces together. So like also the industrial value chain involves obtaining raw materials, goods and services all the way through the final purchase by end users or clients from different solar companies. Yeah, these activities which solar thermal companies adopted to expand their local productive opportunity space through which local entrepreneurs can participate in the solar thermal industrial chain, which is another point in terms of empowering local entrepreneurs for inclusive participation. And as you can see, it's 6.1, 6.2, and 6.3, the IT strategy is repeated from number 4, which was building local system supply. Yeah, and I'll now go to capabilities.
Okay, that's good. Let's move on to the business capabilities and IT capabilities. But again, now here, as I said, just make sure the numbering is sorted out in the future, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, yes, point 3 is actually point 5 in the strategies. So that needs to be changed.
And point 4 is point 6.
Is point 6, yes, sir. So point 3 is reframing production capability, which consists of the processes adopted to redefine production techniques that fit both the technical structure of technology and the local resource aspect. The IT capabilities 3.1, which is modularizing core technology and designing for manufacturability and scale, both link to the reframing production capability. The solar companies incorporate modularity in the architecture of the system to simplify the production process. So in terms of value, the technology and knowledge of the key components are embedded into modular systems so that the production process is characterized by a simple setup. This ensures that the solar companies make manufacturing as simple as possible and achieves low product prices. The IT capability 3.2, which is designing for manufacturability and scale, also links to the reframing production capability. The low-cost assembly model of the system is labor-intensive with very low break-even points. Therefore, entrepreneurs need to operate in local areas to provide solutions with no need for a scale economy. In terms of value, the modularity allows leading companies to provide standard modules with common features, thereby enhancing the scale economy for their capital-intensive business. Therefore, the leading solar companies integrate large-scale manufacturing and labor-intensive processes into their value chain to balance low cost, speed, and scale. The next business capability, which is point
Okay,
4.
don't look at point 4 as yet. Okay, if we look at what you spoke about in terms of the value, that was good that you were bringing the value about now. In terms of the value to the company, what will the value to the company be? Low cost would be a value to the community. So it'll be a social value. Okay, so what's the value to the company in terms of that?
In terms of the company, I think it will be, the speed will be quicker. So products will be produced faster since the manufacturing process is much simpler.
But that you touched on something else. The products will be produced faster because of the local content. Right. So what you're looking at, and due to the local content and products being produced faster, it would mean that the volume that the company sees will be larger. And although they will be making smaller profits per item, the volume will be what will actually be an economic value that will come to the company. Okay. So,
Yeah.
and where would IT fit with that? Can you see where I'm getting at? So in terms of your volume, your IT can actually help in terms of the planning of resources and so forth, so that the resources are available when needed and not sitting in a warehouse. Any questions from the rest of the class as well? Take it you understand. Okay, we can continue.
Okay. Nikhil will discuss the last capability, which is point 4.
So the next business capability is empowering local entrepreneurs for inclusive participation. So this refers to the various activities the solar thermal companies adopted to expand the local productive opportunity space, through which local entrepreneurs can participate in the solar thermal industrial chain. So 4.1, the IT capability enhancing local capacities and business mindset linked to the business capability of empowerment. The people in emerging economies, such as rural areas, are isolated from sources of knowledge from the outside world. Therefore, they often cannot perceive opportunities to develop their own business. In response to this, the solar companies start by providing value-added advisory services and training programs to help local entrepreneurs build their business. For example, training programs for local entrepreneurs and factory building assistants help some regions to build up local manufacturing infrastructure and institutions critical for local business. So now 4.2, the next IT capability, building bridging links, also links to the business capability of empowerment. Empowerment comes from building bridging links among local entrepreneurs, solar businesses, and other external parties. For example, the solar companies set up working stations within rural areas to increase the structural diversity of local networks. These working stations act as ties that bridge the community in both the solar companies and other resources needed to create local businesses. The bridging links enhance the flow of information, increase the productivity, and provide channels of access to business capabilities. So moving on to 4.3, the final IT capability, enacting a new industrial structure. It also links to the business capability of empowerment. This IT capability shows that the leading companies can build on and leverage entrepreneurs to create more appropriate products. The new industrial structure lowers costs throughout the whole industrial chain. For example, shipping semi-assembled modules to satellite factories saves transportation costs. The participation of local entrepreneurs and related low-cost manufacturing capability contribute to the attractiveness of solar thermal systems by lowering costs and adding local content to the product. So that's it for the alignment model. Tiara and Sonali will be discussing the strategic grid next.
Okay, not so fast. Okay, since you had the least amount to do, so you've spoken about IT capabilities and business capabilities, but you didn't show.
I did I did the first part, the business model.
Okay, no, I'm not holding it against you. That was just tongue in cheek. Okay.
Okay.
You didn't link, nor did your team member link the IT capabilities with the IT strategy and the business capabilities with the business strategy. You understand what I'm saying? So remember, it has to be a link throughout. And why I'm emphasizing this as we are going, because remember, if I told you all this right at the beginning, it becomes very much more confusing. But now that you guys are understanding the different compartments, you need to actually form that link. And remember that link. Now, if we look at IT capability, you link the IT capability to the business capability, okay? And via the business capability, it should be linked to the business strategy. Similarly, the IT capability is linked to the IT strategy, and via the IT strategy to the business strategy. Can you see the way I'm actually looking at the link running throughout that grid?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So remember, the next assignment is going to be coming soon, but before that, we still have we've got the next case study. So that will actually give us some practice with it. Okay, are there any questions from the class? I assume you all understand.
Sir, excuse me.
Yep.
Could you kindly repeat what you just said before about before you talked about the assignment?
You mean the linking?
Yeah.
Okay, you see, it's quite easy to see from the diagram. Okay, if you can move to the previous slide. See, from this diagram, you can see that you need to link business strategy to IT strategy. Right. From the following table, you can see quite clearly that you need to link business capability to IT capability. But what we need to look at now, when we look at all four together, that means business strategy must be linked to business capability, IT strategy to IT capability. So that you can see reasonably easily. The other link that has to be there is, for example, IT capability has to be linked to business strategy via IT strategy. Similarly, business capability has to be linked to IT strategy via business strategy. Okay.
Yeah.
So can you see the underlying link? And that link then helps you determine the value that you get out of it. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So any other questions?
How the link will be done when you are
Sorry?
how is it possible that you can link all the parts of the alignment model?
Okay, I didn't get that question very clearly.
How will it be possible to link all the parts of the alignment model, as we are
Okay,
saying?
you have to, you see, that's why, remember we spoke about assumptions, and you needed to make certain assumptions, and you needed to make certain inferences. So for example, if you are talking about modularization of core technology, and if you're looking at that using IT, then IT will be actually looking at how the different modules are linked. So that's an inference that you are making from it. So you are going to identify the processes from the case study, but you have to infer to quite an extent how they are actually linked. Does it answer your question?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, so if we can continue.
Hi everyone, I'm Sonali and I'm going to be doing the strategic grid with Tiara. So first process is redefining identity of technology. So this
Okay,
process starts.
sorry, one moment. Do you have a diagram that has everything in it first?
Yes, at the end with Tiara is presenting.
Okay, so, okay, it's fine. You can continue.
Okay, so this process starts off in the turnaround quadrant as the organization identifies and launches this new venture of identify the technology, and they explore a new strategic opportunity from this process. And this process brings about 20% of has a 20% effect on the overall of the company.
Okay, so just sorry to interrupt you with that again. Okay, a few things that are very important that you've mentioned. Okay, okay, the 20% is a thumb suck, so we won't really worry too much about that. But if you look at the process, you haven't identified the process, okay? So you need to identify what you said, it's redefining identity of technology. Is that your process?
Yes, sir.
Okay, but what you did mention was that it's new to the company and it's still being established, therefore it's in the turnaround, right? But what I'm not too happy about is the size of that. Okay, that's a rhombus, I think. Okay? So the size of that figure, because where in the turnaround is it? Okay, I put my microphone off. You see, you've got the option of touching the space bar when you want the microphone on a temporary basis. So I was touching the space bar, then I let go of the space bar and I carried on talking. Okay, can you see my mouse moving? Anyone? Yes or no?
No,
You
Yes,
can't.
sir.
we cannot.
No, sir.
Also,
No, no.
Okay, let me see where I can get the. Now can you see it? No,
No, sir, we cannot.
can't. The draw feature, you're still not seeing it. Now can you see something? Did you see? Can you see that arrow there?
Yes, sir.
And the arrow there?
Yes.
So can you see now, where is this process? Is it at the bottom arrow here or is it at the top arrow there? Okay, so can you see in terms of the strategic grid, it's actually moving from there to a point there. Now that's too far space. Do you follow what I'm talking about?
Yes,
Therefore,
sir.
you need to use, you can use this rhombus if you want, but you need to use a small one. So it's say about that size or something to illustrate it. Do you have an idea of what I'm talking about?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so in terms of the scale, this is far too big. All right. Okay, you can continue. Let me just
Okay.
erase this.
So after the turnaround, the process proceeds to the strategic quadrant. In this quadrant, the implementation of the new technology transforms the organization and enables the core strategy and operations of the organization as mentioned in the alignment model earlier. The process then moves into the factory quadrant as it still improves the core processes and performance, and it also reduces costs and saves resources and creates value for the organization.
But you see here, your explanation is not in terms of value, but should be in terms of when it moves from here up here into the strategic quadrant, that means there's a significant change in its operations. So your main argument here was in the strategic quadrant, it was being designed, or it was in the design phase. So here in the strategic quadrant, it's being implemented. And since it's being implemented, the operations will increase, and therefore it moves up in terms of into the operations, into the strategic quadrant. Do you understand what I'm talking about?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so similarly now, before you explain, the next move you've shown is moving from the strategic quadrant to the factory quadrant. So remember that essentially means that it has a smaller impact on strategy, but the impact on operations is still the same. And the impact on strategy can become less if you have competitive companies starting to use the same technology. Okay, so I've given you an example. So let's see if you can actually adapt your explanation for that.
Okay, sir. Next slide, please.
No, not so easy. I need you to explain in terms of strategy to factory. Okay, I think I've got a question on the chat here from Stila. He doesn't understand the size of the shape. In terms of the size of the shape, you find what I tried to emphasize was the starting point and the end point is far different in terms of how high or low it is on strategy. So if I just put a point, it's at the particular place on the grid. And if I draw a diagram this big, it means that the strategy and the operations is varying to quite an extent. Okay, Sishla, I'm not sure if that makes it any clearer. Just to try and get back to that, annotate and show you that again. Okay, so what I'm saying, okay, you do understand. Okay, so Sishla says that I'm a shut up. He understands now, so you can continue. Okay, you can continue.
Can I go to process 2? So process 2 is framing new functions. So this process also starts off in the turnaround quadrant. The organization identifies the new framing function, the new functions that are required, and this also increases the value of the organization as it meets the affordability and adaptability needs that it's required. The process then moves to the strategic quadrant as the impact on operations increases. In this quadrant, the company transforms as the new processes are being implemented. In this quadrant, the transformation enables new operations and core strategies. The process then moves to the factory quadrant after implementation of the new functions. There's a chance that competitors can adapt and adopt the functions into their own organizations, and it also reduces the impact on operations. Yeah, but still carries on to improving core processes.
Okay, you said that it reduced impact on operations, but in terms of the diagram, it's same. Okay.
Yes, but on a lesser scale than strategy.
Okay, slightly small. Okay. Okay, that's fine, but you understand why you have to use a smaller diagram, okay?
Yes,
You can
sir.
continue. You can continue.
Okay, process 3. Next slide, please. Okay, process 3 is a radical redesign of the technology structure. This process starts off in the strategy quadrant as the organization transforms existing technology structure of the organization. Um, the impact on operations is high, as well as impact on the strategy. Therefore, it's in the strategic quadrant. Um, this redesign transforms the organization's technology structure. The process then proceeds to the factory quadrant, and here as well, after the implementation of the process and the new technology structure, other companies and competitors can adapt and adopt a similar structure in their companies. So it reduces the impact on the strategy a bit, but
Okay,
still
that's
has.
fine. But you see, what I'd like to know is you said radical redesign. So wouldn't radical redesign actually be in turnaround? It will be high on strategy because it would have been a board level decision. But why you put it into the strategic quadrant and not turnaround?
So I watched a video on the grid and they placed redesigning on the strategic quadrant only.
Sorry?
I watched a YouTube video on the strategic grid and they placed redesigning on the strategic quadrant only and not in turnaround.
Okay, so that's the danger of watching something and not understanding it. So why would you place it in strategy and not in turnaround?
So I see a point.
That's good, but do you want to answer it? Anyone? You want to break out into Moodle and try and answer it? Okay, we wouldn't do that now. Okay, it's a very simple answer. It's a redesign. So in other words, it was still being used. So it's in the implementation stage, still being used, and whilst being used, it's being redesigned. So if it was a new system that was not being used, then it would be in turnaround. Do you follow the argument for that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, you don't have to agree with that. Okay, so in terms of this, so you need to base the argument in terms of positioning. And remember, telling me you saw it somewhere is not going to be good enough. Okay, you can continue.
Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so process 4 is building a local supply system. This process starts off in the turnaround as it's a new venture, and the company launches this, and it creates a value for the organization. The process then proceeds to the strategic quadrant, and the implementation of this new supply system transforms the organization as it enhances the capabilities and the business mindset. The system transforms manufacturability and scale of the organization and enacts a new industrial structure for the organization. Post implementation of this process, the process then proceeds to the factory quadrant. It continues to improve manufacturability and scale, but it has a low impact on strategy, and it may be adopted and adapted by the other competitors.
Okay, good. So you've actually started using some of the things that we've said. But just a matter of curiosity, why did the shape change? I know the
So
other one was a square, so this is different color and everything.
yeah.
You want it to
So
be
for the
different.
final, so for the final grid with everything, so you can
Oh, you're
identify the
bringing it.
different.
Okay. Okay, that's fine.
Okay. So now I hand over to Tiara.
Hi, everyone. The next slide, please. Hi, everyone. I'm Tiara Supto. I'll be taking you through process 5, the reframing of production capability. In this process, we start off in the strategic grid because we are reframing an existing production capability.
In the strategic quadrant, okay? The whole thing is strategic grid.
Strategic quadrant to be specific. And regardless of the size, you uniquely plan. Also, China uniquely plans reframing their production capability to satisfy their solar thermal technology needs. Although in the future, this process has the possibility to transition from the strategic quadrant to the factory quadrants because the competitors can adapt their plans in a similar manner to China. Also, additional information why it's situated in the strategic grid is it has a higher impact on the operations. And when it transitions into the factory quadrant, it does not have the strategic advantage as it used to have before. So it stays in the factory quadrant as its final transition. On to the next slide, please.
Just, no, not the next slide, not so quickly. Just a few things that you said, your choice of words. You said that it's a possibility that other companies will adopt this. So what we are looking in terms of the chronological aspect, in terms of the case study, has it been adopted by other companies? If not, then it stays in the strategic quadrant.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, you understand what I'm saying? So it can have a possibility, which means that's good that the company is aware of it. But until that time, it's still a strategic advantage to the company.
I think maybe our frame of reference was a bit too long-term beyond the case study. So I do agree that it's supposed to stay in the strategic quadrant. But
Okay, so it's actually fine to, if it's only on one place, so you don't have to have a move off it. So if you find there's a process and it's in a point within the company and it stays there, then you just need to motivate why it stays there.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay.
We understand. Okay, no problem. On to the next slide, please. Process 6, empowering local entrepreneurs for exclusive participation. It is situated in the turnaround quadrant due to it being an innovative plan by China, which by first needing to be developed and having a high impact on strategy at that point, and then transitioning to the strategic quadrant once being implemented, and then having a higher impact on operations. And it stays in the strategic grid because from our frame of reference, it hasn't been adopted by other companies, so it stays at the strategic quadrant.
Just one thing, just make sure, okay, when you're writing it, I'm sure you're going to check this. Strategic grid, strategic quadrant are different things, okay? So, okay, you made that same error a few times.
Sorry, sir. They're very big close words. I'm sorry about that. My apologies.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, continue.
Next slide, please. Okay, so finally we're on to the strategic grid for the company transition. Okay, so to establish the diagrams that are part of this grid. So the company transitions we're looking at are the orange small squares that are transitioning into from the support quadrant to the factory quadrant. And the remainder of those shapes are showing the processes transitions as we explained before in the strategic processes. Those it's just now a combination of how the processes led to the company's transition into the from the support quadrant to the factory quadrant. Okay, so now let's discuss this. At the start of the case study, as you can see, China on that small orange square, depicted as a small orange square, relatively low on the IT impact of core strategy and IT impact on core operations. They were situated in the support quadrant for planning to establish its solar thermal technology at the start of the case study. China's processes 1, 2, and 4 final transition to the factory quadrant, as shown in the diagram, were already implemented by competitors, resulting in China's shift towards the factory quadrant. Also, process 3, although it's similar to process 1, 2, and 4, was a radical redesign of technology structure that was an innovative plan, giving China a strategic advantage over its competitors for a limited time, before being implemented by its competitors, resulting in China's small shift towards the factory quadrant. Furthermore, process 5 contributed to China's final shift into the factory, but from the support quadrant into the factory quadrant, due to competitors having established solar thermal technology and having similar production plans. However, process 6 was an innovative plan by China to empower local entrepreneurs for inclusive participation, causing China's small shift towards the strategic quadrant. Therefore, the result of the majority of the processes situated in the factory quadrant places China's final transition from the support quadrant to the factory quadrant. Thank you. You can continue to the next slide. If anyone,
No. Just go back to the previous slide, please.
Sorry.
Okay.
Okay.
What I'd like to see in the slide, okay, you've done them separately, which is fine. Okay, and if you're using different shapes, that's okay as well. But I would like to see within the processes, for example, process 1, I think if I remember correctly, was 20%. I'd like to see the percentages to the impact on the entire company on this common slide, okay, or the grid that's common. What is good in this slide? And I think if everyone follows, can you see the movement, the initial movement from the company? Okay, if I can find the other. Okay, so if we look at this, okay, I see there's a question from Stichler again. The different shapes. The square is a company, and these other shapes are processes within the company. Okay, so what we are looking at is the impact on the company as a whole. Can everyone see my mouse out here on the screen? No.
No, sir.
No.
No. Okay, let me just try and one of this. Can you see it now?
No, sir, we cannot.
Okay, now can you see it?
Yes, sir. With your
Okay.
name.
Yes, with my name. I don't know where it got my name from, but anyway. So that's a starting point, right? Now, the way you've done this is quite good because you'd notice that process 1 was in the turnaround and finally ended up in the factory quadrant. So you showed it move just up. So you moved up there. Okay.
Yes, sir.
So, and also the next one was good. So your movement on this diagram, as you showed from there to there, and then to there, coincides with the movement of your processes that you've done. Okay, so and finally out here. So what I'm saying is that was very well done in terms of the company, how the company moved in terms of the processes. So what I would have liked to have seen in this diagram, in addition, okay, you said you've forgotten the number 6. I assume that's number 6.
Sir, the number 6, yes, sir. I'm sorry, the yellow.
Okay, yellow on yellow.
Yellow.
Okay, so, but the important thing is, okay, I worked that out was number 6 because that was the only one missing.
It is kind
And
of hard to
showing
choose.
these processes.
Sorry, sir. Pardon me. I had to choose yellow because all the other colors were chosen. I had to choose a variant, but I was very limited in my choice.
Okay, we could have changed the text to black and it would have shown.
So actually, there was a problem in which I could only change one of the shades text to black, and the other one would stay white, and I didn't want that to conflict with anything.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, so all of us are learning with this aspect here, okay? So the whole idea about the way you've done this, I said it's kind of good, but just include the percentages and this movement. As you can see, I actually trace the movement of the company in terms of the way your diagram actually flows as well, okay? So if you can continue.
Any more questions anyone would like to ask? Because it's close to the end of the presentation, and would you all like me to explain the processes a bit more? Or
Is Sishla, don't feel shy. Do you understand what she was talking about?
Oh, yes, I do understand. Thank you very much.
With the different shapes and so forth now.
Yeah, yes, now I understand very well how they are used and all that.
Okay.
awesome, because if you need any other explanation, I can start from process 1 and show you why it transitioned. I don't mind going over the processes again along with the company transition, so don't be afraid to ask. You're welcome, Ashina.
Okay, so there are no more questions, okay? That's...
Okay, so thank you very much for watching us. This is group 3. We're signing out now.
Okay. So I guess that's a new way of saying it, okay? We're signing out. Okay, but we're not, but we're not logging out as yet.
Yes, we're not logging out. Please don't misconstrue it.
Okay. So what we need to still do is sort out marks and next week's presentation. So you can stop the recording now.
So is it fine if I
And if you
stop
can,
sharing my screen?
yes, if you can stop sharing your screen as well.